If all has gone according to plan, this video has been uploaded on, or at the very least around, the 1 year anniversary of my first ever video. Now that I've been doing this for a year, I want to take a moment to stop and talk about what it's actually like to do this and what the experience of making each of my videos was like. The story of this channel starts back in late January last year. I'd learned how to do basic video editing a few months prior and decided I'd buy a fairly cheap microphone and give the whole YouTube thing a go. So I started out with a fairly basic and short video, but wasn't really feeling it. I felt like the script I wrote wasn't super great, like the ideas I wanted to express didn't really come across that well, and so I decided to give up on that project. I'm not saying what it was about because I think I might actually revisit it sometime soon now that I'm more confident in my writing. The issue now was that I had no idea what the hell to make a video about. I did have ideas for things I wanted to talk about when I created the channel. Like, I knew I wanted to make videos about the Persona games, for example, but the issue there was that I knew they'd all be pretty big videos, definitely not ones I wanted to take on as my very first video. And so, I did nothing for a month. Okay, that's not really the full picture. I was trying to brainstorm ideas during that time. I mean, I just bought the microphone, I had to use it for something, but I struggled to come up with anything. It was after a while that I decided it'd be fun to talk about the Somnium Files. I'd played both games around the time when I decided to make a channel and really enjoyed them, and I figured I'd make a smaller video about them, just focused on a small range of topics. It would be a short video that wouldn't take that long to make. The issue though was that I had the games on Switch, and you're not getting any footage off of that thing without a capture card, so that idea got shelved until finally in late March both games just happened to go on sale on Steam, and I decided to go for it. And so production on that video began, kinda. So the issue was that I had other responsibilities at the time, so I couldn't really start working on the video for a while, and even when I did, I realised that getting footage from a game you just played a few months ago, and a visual novel at that, is really boring. I generally don't really like replaying games immediately after I finished them, with some exceptions of course, and so replaying a game with such limited gameplay so soon after my first playthrough was not an enjoyable experience. It just felt like the game was too fresh in my mind, which made the experience feel rather repetitive. You'll notice that I mentioned buying both games earlier, when the video only ended up being about the first game. Well, that's because I couldn't stomach the thought of getting footage from the second one too, so I reduced the scope of the video to be solely about the first game. I finally got to really start with the script in June when my other responsibilities were taken care of. Pretty early in the writing process I realised, hang on, this kinda sucks. It was way too bloated. I wanted to make a simpler video, and this was the exact opposite. There was just way too much time wasted on unimportant details. I took a step back and started to do what I could to reduce bloat. As you can see from the length of the completed video, those efforts did not go well. The real issue with the script is that most of it is just spent recounting the events of the game. Very little of it is me actually offering my own commentary on things. It wasn't a super fun way to write a video, so it took a while and I ended up finishing it in August. Beyond that, it also wasn't that fun to record. The first issue was that hearing a recording of my voice for the first time was just... ugh. I hated how I sounded, and this is where I'll offer my first bit of advice to people starting to make videos or considering making them. Hating your voice at first is normal. Don't try to change your voice, you can't. Just push through and eventually you'll get used to it. People really don't care about your voice as much as you think they do. Just try to put some energy into your voiceover so you don't sound bored. If you're bored, the viewers will be too. I ran into this issue with my first video. Because the script was pretty bland and didn't have much life, recording it wasn't a very fun experience, and I feel like that really came through in the voiceover. By extension, the editing process wasn't that fun either. Editing is more fun when you've got more lively material to work with. There's more room to do creative and fun stuff with the editing when it's like that, but because I was just kind of recounting the events of the game, the editing was pretty much just a paint-by-numbers kind of process. When I spoke about a specific scene, I'd show footage of that scene and that'd kind of be it. Finally, I got the video done and uploaded in September. The final product really wasn't something I was satisfied with, but I don't want it to come across like I completely hate that video and everything about it. Yeah, it was quite a difficult video to make, and the process was anything but smooth. But it was a highly valuable experience. I learned so much just from one video, like learning what kinds of pitfalls to avoid with future videos. Plus, while I'm not super proud of the contents of the video, I'm proud of the fact that I stuck with it despite all the struggles I had. Just having an actual completed video felt great, no matter how the video itself actually turned out. Definitely the most valuable lesson I learned was to not over-explain things, and by applying it, I feel like even my second video was quite a notable step up in quality. Though it still took me a while to completely shake that habit. More on that later. So, with those lessons in mind, you'd think I'd get straight onto making my second video. I did immediately have the idea to make a video about Killer 7, but it took a while for me to actually get started with it. As I alluded to in my third video, I was going through some stuff in September. It happened pretty soon after my first video was uploaded and lasted until early October. I'm not getting into details, but all I could really manage to do during that time was play the game for footage, and even that was a struggle. It was only after bouncing back from that I was able to really begin work on this video. Overall, once I truly began to focus on it, it was a pretty smooth process. Having more actual gameplay to talk about definitely helped. I felt like I was better able to put my feelings about that into words compared to narrative elements, and that kinda shines through in the script. The story section is passable, but not really as good as the gameplay stuff. While definitely better than my first video, I can see multiple places where my over-explaining habit reared its head again. It wasn't really necessary to describe each playable character in detail, nor was it necessary to do the same with the game's NPCs. One new thing I tried was including a bit of humour, but not too much, since I like to keep things focused and not derail videos with non-stop jokes. Those were probably the most fun parts of the video to edit. It was even a chance to play around with keyframing and stuff for the first time. The video as a whole was just much easier to edit, because much of it was spent discussing gameplay. I didn't need to be as specific with the footage I used. The decision was up to me when it came to how best to visually represent what I was saying, and that made the process more engaging. Rather than taking over a month to edit, it only took about a week. I could still see room for improvement with the video, but the important thing was that I was way happier with it compared to my first one. Despite it only being half the length, I said way more stuff in that time. There are definitely some parts that could do with some revisions, but for the most part the video was good enough. The most impressive thing is that I was able to stay focused on the video at all, as at the time I got pretty hooked on Rune Factory 4. Honestly, farming games are just the best genre for times when you're feeling low. Just make sure not to play Rune Factory 5 on Switch. The terrible performance in that made me feel dirty. Fun fact, I'm actually in the middle of Rune Factory 3 while making this video. That one's especially fun because all the characters are complete lunatics. Getting back on topic, I had a lot of momentum after finishing that video, though I ended up losing it for a few months, as the gap between it and my next video shows. Like I said, I was going through some stuff between my first and second video, and I think I was basically just taking life slowly at the time after bouncing back from that, and before I knew it, it was Christmas. That isn't to say I did nothing in that time. I already knew what my next video would be, and I actually had the script for it done before the end of the year. I just didn't get around to recording it until January. I also started playing the Zero Escape trilogy and recording footage in November for my first really big video, which came to fruition earlier this year. The Spy Family video was a different experience. It was the first time I was covering something other than a game, so that changed a few things about the process. Most notably editing and gathering quote-unquote footage. This required me to make sure I had all the relevant pages downloaded, which was very different compared to just playing a game and recording with OBS. Making a video out of only still images was obviously a new process. I wasn't actually sure how to approach it at first, but I'm happy with the approach I took to just use a background image and show pages when it was relevant. It's definitely a much more simple video visually compared to my others, since there's next to no motion, but I don't mind that. I felt like it was more the kind of thing where I wanted the writing to speak for itself. On the topic of the writing, the fact that I was writing about a manga came with its own challenges. Discussing stories wasn't exactly my strong suit in my previous videos, and this video would pretty much solely be about that. This script was the first time I feel like I was actually able to properly explore the topics I discussed in some depth. One other thing that massively improved the video was that I shared a bit about myself and how I related to one of the characters. It can definitely be anxiety-inducing to share things about yourself, but videos are a personal thing, and when you put a bit of yourself into a video, it gives it more identity. I'm not saying you need to share something on the more serious side like I did. Anything is fine, really. That video was also when I really cut down on my habit of over-explaining and recounting events in a rather dull way. I actually cut out a fair amount of the script where I spoke about the comedic aspects of Spy Family. The main focus of the video was on the more serious side, so I figured it wasn't really that necessary to include it, and I'd say that was the right call. I did still kind of fall into the over-explaining trap with one of the characters' backstories, but otherwise I'm happy with how the video turned out. All of these things made it easily the best video I'd made at the time. After that, for the first time ever, I got a video out super fast. My first video about Metaphor was a result of all the information about the game at the end of last year getting me super excited for it. I decided to make the video because it would be an easier one to make while I prepared to get started with my much bigger and more difficult Zero Escape video since I finished playing the trilogy in January. I had the script for this video written in January and recorded it at the same time as my prior video, so as soon as I was done with that one, all I had to do was edit the video. Because I was talking about an unreleased game, I just worked with the footage that was currently released at the time, saving me the time I'd normally spend recording footage, which only made the process easier. Writing about an unreleased game was definitely different, but I had a lot of fun with it since I'm looking forward to the game so much, not to mention it was my first chance to talk about Persona for a little bit, which I also enjoyed. I wouldn't really call it one of my stronger videos. It was intended to be an easier project while I put more effort into larger videos after all. But I felt like it marked a point where I started to become pretty decent at keeping things focused and moving forward constantly. I wasn't getting bogged down in unnecessary details, and I made sure to be making my own points, offering my thoughts on the different aspects of the game, and not just reading out a list of the game's features and mechanics. It was definitely the smoothest process I'd ever had making a video. Having so much of the work done in advance helped tremendously, and so I was able to get it out just a week after my previous video. Things would soon slow down as I started to take on my first big project though. My Zero Escape video was like a test of how far I'd come since my first video. Where I struggled to make a video about a visual novel when I first created my channel, I was now taking on the challenge of writing about the genre again, but this time I'd be covering 3 different games in one video. I was excited to write this video. I pictured all the points I wanted to make and really looked forward to how it'd all come together. The thing is, stuff never really turns out how you might imagine. My initial plan was to cover each game individually, and I spent about a month approaching the video from this angle. Doubts were creeping in. The biggest one was to do with the fact that it was just too long. I may have planned for it to be a big video, and I may have been talking about 3 whole games, but even so, I felt like the video was really pushing it. I didn't want to just use the fact that I was making a bigger project as an excuse for putting out a really poorly paced video. As a result of this, after a month of work, I'd finished up to the end of the section about the second game, and my doubts had grown large enough that I felt like it would be good to reevaluate things. I thought about it, and I realised that if I kept going down the path I was on, the video would be over 3 hours, maybe it'd even exceed 4, I couldn't really say for sure. The reason it was so long was because of the approach I was taking with the structure of the video. I wanted to try and convey the feeling of playing through the games. In each of them you start without much of an idea of what's going on and piece things together the further through the game you are. Trying to convey that experience meant I was discussing a lot of the events that occur in each game, and that's where most of the length came from. In that state, it was definitely still better than my first video. I had more to actually say, but it still fell into the trap of over-explaining things. In the end, I decided that I was happy with certain parts I'd written, but that all of the play-by-play of the game's events had to go. So I ended up restarting the whole script with some repurposed parts from the original one, and I was immediately much happier with the results. The thing that really drove me to restart the whole thing was the realization that, although I was talking about every little thing in Zero Escape originally, I wasn't actually interested in all of those things. For example, I'd spend time discussing characters that didn't particularly interest me, and it really came through in what I'd written. I really didn't have much to actually say about them. It was just time wasted on explaining who these characters were without me having anything of my own to say about them to make those explanations feel worthwhile. I'd say my over-explaining habit came from a desire to make my videos feel definitive, like they cover everything to do with the topics I discuss. And I feel like it was only with this video that I was able to truly realise that was the cause and begin to let go of that desire. Paradoxically, I feel like the more you try to say, the less you end up saying, and by narrowing your focus down a bit, you can give more time and attention to the things that really interest you about a topic. As I said earlier on, if you're not interested in what you're discussing, the viewers probably won't be either. Another good way to evaluate your scripts is to ask yourself, would I watch this? And in the case of my original Zero Escape script, the answer would be no. Any points I would make would just be drowned out by excessive recapping. Although I reused some stuff from the original script, because I was making fundamental changes to the structure of the video, the connective tissue that linked that stuff had to be changed, and so I decided to go about making a video that's more of an overview of the entire series, rather than covering the games individually. By doing this, I was able to summarize all 3 games briefly at the beginning and then have the rest of the video dedicated solely to the stuff I found interesting. Honestly, I didn't even really want to include a summary like that, but Zero Escape is complex, and I think trying to explain certain things as they came up would have been more difficult without a summary to establish the broad strokes. In the end, I feel like the video only benefited from me restarting the script. Sure, I didn't get to convey the experience of playing through the trilogy like I initially planned, but that was a small price to pay for a much more confident and focused video. It's still my favourite video I've ever made. It's really gratifying to look at it and compare it to my first video. They're both of similar lengths, but I had way more to say in this video compared to my first, and I feel really proud of the fact that I was able to complete a video this big. After this, I was kinda unsure what to do next, and so I fell back on some shorter, easier videos. The first was about a potential Persona 4 remake. I'm honestly not really that happy with that video. While I was writing it, it felt more like a fun discussion of certain aspects of Persona 3 and Persona 4, but I feel like it came across as being way more negative once I'd recorded it and listened to what I was saying. There's also the fact that I just got some stuff wrong in that video, like apparently that rumoured Persona party game isn't actually happening, which is a relief, but I wish I found that out before I uploaded the video. I wouldn't call it a bad video, I stand by the points I made, but I think I find the negative tone kinda off-putting, even if it wasn't intended. I don't really want to make too many negative videos if I'm being honest, not because I don't like being critical of things. I raise a few criticisms of Persona in my latest video, for example. It's instead that I don't really want to make videos about things I hate, because that necessitates making myself play games I don't enjoy, and I do want making videos to be an enjoyable process. It was hard enough getting the footage for my first video because the game was too fresh in my mind, and that was a game I really like. I can't imagine having a good time getting footage for a game I don't even want to play. I also had a bit of a mental block around when I uploaded this video. It was shortly after my biggest video yet, so I almost felt like I'd taken a step back and regressed by making a shorter video that didn't require anywhere near as much work. I struggled with this for a little while, feeling like I was just putting out lesser videos and that everything had to be a huge project like my Zero Escape video. I was finally able to get past this when I looked at other YouTube channels. When looking at them, I could tell not every video had the same amount of work put into them. I don't mean that as an insult, it's just reality that not every video is going to be massive and the viewers don't seem to care. I think if you like a channel, you're just happy to see videos from it at all, whether they're short ones or long ones, because you like hearing from the person behind it. Personally, I'm a big fan of the channel NitroRad and the guy who makes the videos, James. James has started making bigger videos in recent years, and you can see it reflected in the frequency of uploads. Because he's making videos as a full-time job, he's recently felt the need to make some easier, less scripted videos in between his bigger ones, and I'm enjoying them. His proper videos are definitely better, but as I said, if you like a creator, you'll be happy to see videos from them, even if they didn't take as much work as their other videos. With that mental block out of the way, I decided to go ahead and make my latest video, not counting this one. I make no secret of the fact that I would very much like to play Metaphor ReFantazio, and although it's kind of basic, that was the motivation behind that video. I wanted to make a video that wasn't just covering stuff that others have likely already covered, so I decided to put my obsession to use and cover more obscure details that I noticed from however many times I've watched all the trailers now. Making the video was a very smooth process. Writing about something you're very interested in really does make a difference. I was even able to adapt pretty easily to the rather different format the video has, being a series of short discussions that quickly goes through a lot of different topics rather than a traditional script that sticks to a few main topics. I went with this approach because I felt like it was the only way to go about covering all the rather different points I wanted to make, but I actually like how it turned out. It gave the video a kind of quick-fire, fast pace while also letting me cover a lot of different things. I'd like to make another video with that format if the opportunity comes up. As I established earlier, I've struggled with certain videos, but I'd say that making them has been a really enjoyable experience. If you're interested in doing the same, I say go for it. If you don't give it a try, you'll never know whether you like it or not. Of course, I am going to have to throw in the disclaimer that you should keep your expectations realistic. If you just want to do this to make loads of money, don't, because chances are you won't even make a single penny, let alone get super rich like the biggest people on the platform. You really need to enjoy doing this if you plan to do it full time, as based on what I've heard many people say now, the average channel really doesn't make that much money. That's why they have Patreon pages and take sponsorships all the time. You should basically just treat any money you earn as a bonus. Enjoyment should come first. Even if you're earning a fair amount, if you don't enjoy making videos, then it just sounds like a one-way ticket to burnout to me. I've made no money at all. I didn't even gain any subscribers until my last video, and yet during that, the idea of stopping just seemed wrong to me, since I knew that I enjoyed making videos. If anything, my channel not being monetized is way more freeing. I don't worry about the performance of my videos at all, and it's nice. I just upload them and feel the satisfaction of getting another video done. If you're still interested in trying this, knowing that you're probably not going to make much money, then I have some general advice about a few aspects of the video making process to hopefully motivate you to give it a try, as well as steer you in the right direction. My advice for writing starts with this. Please, please, please actually plan out a structure for your script. I know it sounds simple and obvious, but for whatever reason I didn't do that with my first video and the result was pretty rough. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, you just want to lay out a general foundation for what you'll actually talk about. That way you'll avoid the video scale going way beyond what you initially intended. Aside from that, I mainly just have some advice for your mindset while writing, since I'm still learning all this stuff too. If a script you're making really isn't going well, try to stay calm. You don't suck, just try to find the issues with it. In the worst case scenario where you're thinking of giving up the video, don't just scrap it, leave it for later when you feel more experienced and capable of saying what you want to say. Aside from that, take pride in the videos you make. It's a simple thing, but if you hate all your videos, you're probably not going to stay motivated. Obviously you should be self-critical so you can keep improving, but you don't want to go so far that self-criticism starts to look more like self-loathing. If you really can't find anything to be proud of about a video, at least try being proud of the work you put into it. Chances are, if you feel like you failed with a video, then making it was probably a difficult experience. And when something is difficult, you really have to work hard to get it done. My first video is my worst one, and it was the hardest to make, so I was at least able to take pride in the work I put into it. And when you're not completely hating a video and feeling inadequate, that's when you're in the rational headspace to learn from it, even if it wasn't super great. As for editing, I feel like it might be the most daunting part for some people, so I want to show that it's really not as complicated as you might think. This isn't a full editing tutorial, but this is basically all you need at the beginning. So I'm going to open up DaVinci Resolve and import in some footage. Now I just drag the footage into the source window and I can navigate to any part of it. From here I can just select in and out points, which mark where you want a clip to start and end. Then I can drag that clip onto the timeline, and I can even drag only the audio or video from that clip onto the timeline too. When you're starting out, that's basically all you need to know. From there, if there's something fancier you want to do, just look up how to do it. To illustrate my point that editing isn't that hard, this is actually my first time ever using DaVinci Resolve. I've been using Premiere Pro up until now. I've been meaning to switch to DaVinci for a while because Premiere kinda sucks, but I've always just been too lazy to make the switch until now. My Adobe license is expired now, so I have no choice. Now for my special tutorial on how to use the YouTube Analytics page. Don't. Tutorial over! It just isn't helpful. I've heard all this horror stories about the feature that rates the performance of your last 10 videos, and an unfortunately common scenario is for someone to make a great video they worked super hard on, only for YouTube to tell them it performed the worst out of their last 10 videos. I thankfully haven't experienced that, but I imagine it must be soul-crushing. What I find most insidious is how the analytics page is presented like it's just some friendly advice from YouTube, yet if you actually follow the advice they give you, you'll just end up a burned out, overworked husk. The algorithm is impossible to understand since it keeps changing, and anyone who tells you they've cracked the code with it is lying. But at the very least, I think the assumption that you need to regularly upload is pretty accurate. And if, like most channels on YouTube, you're just a one-person operation, trying to get out videos as often as possible will be really bad for your well-being. So just don't follow any of this analytics crap. Like I said before, I'm not monetized, so I don't really concern myself with the views my videos get, and it's really nice. I could get upset that my Zero Escape video, the video I put the most work into so far, doesn't have anywhere near as many views as one of the easier videos I made, but I don't mind. One last thing about worrying too much about views. YouTube really skews your perception of numbers. Over 1,000 people watched my last video, and on YouTube 1,000 videos is considered low. I feel like videos tend to get treated as flops unless they're getting tens of thousands of views at minimum, which is obviously pretty messed up. I mean, imagine being up on a stage with 1,000 people watching you. That's a huge number of people. Or even just imagine 100. That's a lot too. So yeah, don't let YouTube skew your perception of views. With actual financial success on YouTube basically just being down to chance, you should count a video as a success if even just like 10 or more people watched it and cared what you had to say. Anyway, I think that's basically all I had to say with this video. My short answer as to whether or not you should make videos is that you 100% should. Obviously just with a few stipulations that I already mentioned earlier. Negative videos may get more traffic, but I think YouTube could always use more people passionately sharing the things they love, and if that sounds fun to you, you shouldn't let the financial side of things stop you. Just do this as a hobby. If anything, it's less stressful this way since there's no pressure to rush out videos. If you end up enjoying it, then who cares if you're not making any money? It's not stopping me.